Going down this weekend, we have UFC Fight Night, Emmett versus Murphy. And in this video, I will be giving my full card breakdown along with a prediction for every single fight on the card. Man, your boy's been doing pretty good with these full card predictions, man. At UFC 313, I got the clean sweep. UFC Mexico, I only got one fight wrong. So let's see if we can keep that momentum going, man, as we're starting to build some steam here. Because from top to bottom, look, I know we're in the apex, and I know a lot of people get real upset about that, and I hear you, right? We'd rather have a fight night with a crowd and a pay-per-view, obviously, to where it's just the build-ups are fun. There's the electricity in the arena. To where at the apex, it's just flat, man. It's flat. It doesn't have the same type of excitement, but what it does have is usually really good matchmaking, really fun matchups, a lot of finishes. We usually see a lot of fun things that happen inside the apex. And another thing that I've really started to notice with these apex cards, this is a perfect example of it, right? We have a good main event with Emmett and Murphy, but we have a lot of interesting matchups where we have fighters that are coming over from the Contender Series, fighters with their backs to the wall looking to stay on the roster, fighters that are looking to start to build some momentum to enter into the rankings. Like, that's kind of what these apex cards have become, as a stepping stone and an opportunity for a lot of these fighters, man. And I think that this card is a perfect example of some tricky matchups, some fun matchups. Looking forward to breaking this one down. Let's hop into it, starting with the very first fight of the evening between Lookboonmee and Estela Nunes. To me, I think that Estela Nunes is completely outmatched in this fight. Look, she recently was supposed to fight at UFC London against Molly McCann, and, that didn't happen. So now she's been added to this card to take on Loma. And that is a completely different opponent than Molly McCann. Look, there's no mystery with Nunes. Look, she's pretty solid on the feet. She's a pretty good striker, but she struggles when it comes to mixing everything together. And I think that that's the problem in this fight is Loma, she came into the UFC and was basically just a Thai style type of fighter, right? Good high guard, moves forward. She's got good knees, elbows, fast kicks. Like, she's your prototypical Muay Thai style fighter, right? She's excellent on the feet. But it's just like with Nunes, like, what's she going to do better than Loma, right? Because it was that Loma was just basically a Thai-style fighter. Now we're seeing the evolution in her game to where, she wins a decision against Sam Hughes, goes out there, loses to Lupi Godinez. But, a lot of with the Thai fighters, they have a little bit of holes in the boxing. And Lupi Godinez, she's a good boxer and a very solid overall fighter. Goes out there, beats Denise Gomes, gets a submission over Elise Reed. So we saw a little bit of the evolution in the game of Loma, and then goes out there and beats Bruno Brazil by decision. To me, this just comes down to Loma is the better overall fighter. And I question, I think that Molly probably would have beaten Nunes. Again, I don't really know because we saw Molly just retire. So who knows what kind of Molly would have showed up in that fight. But, she comes over from one, right? But ever since being in the UFC, she's been on a 4-fight skid, right? And not only a skid, she's gotten finished in most of these outings. Gets subbed by Ariane, gets, loses to decision by Sam Hughes, gets finished by Yasmin, and then gets finished by Victoria Dudakova. So it just has not been a good, stint here in the UFC for Estela. I just think it gets worse in the apex where Loma goes out there. She's better everywhere. And the threat of the grappling in her back pocket to where if she decides to mix in the grappling, Nunes is going to be in all sorts of trouble in this fight. But even if it plays out on the feet, Loma's way faster. She's cleaner. She is the better overall mixed martial artist. I feel very confident in her getting this one done. Maybe she finds a sub. Maybe she finds a finish somewhere. But I'm going to say by decision. I think Loma, it's very simple. She's just the clear, better overall fighter here. Moving on, we have Vanessa Demopoulos and Talita Alencar. To me, this is probably going to be a very straightforward matchup. I think when we look at this, it comes down to who is the better grappler, right? In terms of the overall skill set, I would give the edge to Vanessa. I think that she's a little bit more of a complete fighter. But what we've seen from Alencar, look, she's got skills. She's got good submissions. She has pretty solid grappling, right? We saw that in Titan FC where she got a finish over Karen, goes over to LFA, which I'm high on LFA prospects. That's a very good stepping stone to get to the UFC. Nice job, right? Comes on to the Contender Series. It's a draw with Stephanie Luciano, right? So, kind of right? On the Contender Series, that's your big opportunity. Wasn't very impressive. Goes out there and beats Rihanna Amanda by decision. Then they run it back with Stephanie Luciano, and she loses by unanimous decision. So you had a draw here on the Contender Series. You run it back, and you basically you get shut out here, right? So again, just not a particularly good look for Toledo. And what we've seen from Vanessa, she's just better, man. She's better. I think on the feet, she's better. We saw, against Maria, she looked really good. Against Carolina, she lost. But again, Carolina's a pretty game opponent, right? Goes out there, beats Murata, is able to beat Emily Ducote by decision. But she is coming off of a loss to Jacqueline Amorim, who I think is a really good fighter. I think a lot of us would say that. And got subbed, right? So again, if she's finding herself in some grappling exchanges with a very game grappler in Alencar, sure, Toledo could win on control time. She could find a submission. I just don't think she's the better fighter. I think very simply here that Vanessa is the better overall fighter. I'm going to ride with her to win this one by decision. Maybe someone finds a submission in this fight where they get tangled up in some grappling exchanges. I think this is predominantly a grappler's fest. I'm going to go Vanessa. I think that she is the better grappler, and I think she's just the better overall fighter. Moving on, we have Victor Henry and Pedro Falcao. This is an interesting fight here because I think Pedro Falcao, he's a solid fighter, right? He's got good pressure, the way he moves forward, mixes things up. He's got a solid ground game, right? We've seen that even prior to getting to the UFC. He can put guys out, and especially if he takes you down, he's got good control of the ground. He's got, just a very solid ground game when it comes to being able to finish people as well. We saw that on the Contender Series against James. That was a very impressive performance, but that was 3.5 years ago, right? So he's someone that hasn't been super active since getting the win on the Contender Series, then goes out there on Tough and Up and wins by submission. But it's like, so he's on the Contender Series, gets a W, then has to go to another promotion. Now he comes into the UFC against Victor Hugo, and he loses by decision. Now, Victor Hugo's a solid opponent, right? So I don't hold that too much against Pedro. But to me, this just comes down to which Victor Henry do we see? Because I think Victor Henry is the better overall fighter. I think that his striking is better. I think that he has decent enough grappling to be able to kind of fight off what Pedro brings to the table. But what we've seen from Victor is that hot and cold type of deal, man. And whenever we see fighters that are hot and cold, it just makes me nervous to pick them, right? He goes out there, he loses to Rafael Sunsao 2.5 years ago. That was an older Sunsao. Beats Tony Gravely by decision, split decision, right? Goes out there and gets a finish over Yaya. Like, okay, right? And then he loses to Charles Jourdain by submission. Like, I'm not sold on Victor Henry. I know he's a scrapper. I know that I would say he's the better fighter here, but I'm gonna roll with him in this, but I feel like he's gonna make me regret it, man. I feel like he's gonna make me regret it because while I think that Pedro is a skilled fighter, I absolutely think that he could win this. I just want to see a little bit more from him in the UFC. I'm gonna say Victor Henry wins this one by decision, is able to stuff some of the takedowns, outpoint him, and just win on the scorecards, man. I think he lands more shots, is able to put up some points here. I think Victor Henry wins by decision, but I absolutely could see Pedro taking him down, holding him down, beating him up, and finding a way to get him out of there. But I just want to see a little bit more from Pedro before I trust in him to get it done. Even though I think this is a very winnable fight, I'm still going to trust with what we've seen so far from Victor. Even though he's a little hot and cold, this is a tricky fight to pick. Moving on, we have Rhys McKee versus Daniel Frunza. This is an interesting one because everyone is so quick to write off Rhys McKee. And I kind of understand why, right? He comes over to the UFC on Fight Island, gets absolutely obliterated by Khamzat Chimaev. And, I mean, at the time, it was like, we were just like, wow, he just got dominated. He got taken down by this guy who, I saw Khamzat, obviously, before he came to the UFC over at Brave, so I kind of knew what he was about. But a lot of folks, I think, were just like, well, Rhys just really sucks to get dominated by Chimaev. And now we see it's like, okay, well, you got dominated by Khamzat. That's not a big deal. But it's the problem of every single fight that he's had in the UFC he's lost, right? He lost to Chimaev, lost another fight, finds himself out of the UFC, wins, goes on a nice little streak here to get back into the UFC, and then is coming off a loss to Angelosa, coming off a loss to, most recently to Chidi Njokuani. And he did have moments, right, in the Njokuani fight, but, he's a tall, rangy guy in the weight class, right? He utilizes his range pretty well. And Daniel does have power. And Daniel's one of those guys who he hasn't faced any adversity, really, right? I mean, he's coming off of the Contender Series, gets a very impressive finish. But up until that, I mean, he's finishing everybody, right? He is absolutely a knockout artist. And whenever we see these guys make their UFC debut, if they aren't able to get the opposition out of there early, what happens? How's the gas tank hold up? There's all these questions that have to be answered. The fortunate thing for Daniel in this fight is if he is not able to get Reese out of there. Because, by the way, McKee, he's pretty tough. He's pretty durable. He's got a good chin on him. So in the event that Daniel doesn't get him out of there, I just don't know that Reese is that big of a threat, right, to Frunza as the fight would play out anyway. I mean, I think he could pick him apart and absolutely win a decision. Maybe could get him out of there. But I think if Frunza is patient, I think if he works things together, I think that if he's patient, works the body, backs him up against the fence, doesn't just come forward and throw caution to the wind looking for this, crazy viral KO, which if you could get that, obviously it helps him, and that would be great. But sometimes you burn yourself out, you're tired, and then you lose a fight that you shouldn't be losing. So I'm going to believe and hopefully that Frunza will come into this with a smart game plan, and I think that he actually finds a finish in this fight. And I'm going to say in the second round, I think Reese McKee kind of survives, hangs around, and I think Frunza lands some shots and has McKee in some trouble. Then he has a more tactical breakdown approach in the second round to set up a big shot. I'm going Daniel by finish. I think the guy is very talented. He's dangerous, but if he fatigues, if he's not able to get a finish, that's where things could get interesting, but I don't know that we see that, considering that I just don't know if Reese is going to be able to deal with the power that Frunza brings to the table and the confidence that he's coming into this fight with. I'm going with Daniel by finish. Moving on, we have Dion Barbosa and Diana Belbita. This, to me, is one of those fights that, again, it's like a fight is a fight. Anything can happen, but I really don't think that this is that close. There's no crazy breakdown here. I think Barbosa is the clear better fighter. I think that she's probably going to submit Diana. I'll say second round submission. Look, Diana's someone who's coming off of a submission loss to Molly McCann. And I know people give Molly a lot of shit because she was kind of hyped up and, she kind of had a little bit of personality. She's a fun fighter, right? She goes out there and, she's going to scrap. But she's not like top tier, right? She's not top tier. She's exciting, but that's kind of it, right? She's hot and cold, wins a few, loses a few. And so she gets subbed by Molly McCann. Like, is Molly McCann better on the ground than Barbosa? I mean, I don't even think it's relatively close. Then she loses to Carolina by decision, right? Yeah, she got a win over Maria Oliveira, but this is a different animal here in Barbosa, in my opinion. I mean, for what we've seen from her since coming over to the UFC, she goes on the Contender Series, gets a sub. Anytime you get a finish on the Contender Series, you're going to catch my attention, at least. I know you're going to get everybody's attention pretty much because a finish, that's what we want to see. You go out there, you win a decision in your debut over Kara Katie. That's a solid win, in my opinion, right? Then she loses to Miranda Maverick, right? So she's coming off a loss here, but Miranda Maverick, she's a solid fighter. She's got good grappling. She's a strong opponent. That's a good test for Barbosa, right? So she wasn't able to get it done, but you went to a step up in Maverick. Now you're heading to what I think is a couple steps back against Diana. I just don't think Diana takes fighting all that serious. Like, maybe she does, maybe she doesn't. I don't know. It just doesn't seem like it to me. I just think Barbosa is more dedicated. She's a better overall fighter, and I think her ground game is going to be an issue for Diana in this fight. Maybe it goes to decision, but I think that we could see a submission in this fight. I have Barbosa getting it done either way. Moving on, we have Davy Grant versus Daniel Santos. This is going to be a fun matchup because I think with Daniel Santos, look, he's a shoot-to-box guy, and what we've seen from him inside of his career, right? He's someone that comes to the UFC, takes on Julio Arce, which I think is a good fight to go back and watch to try to indicate what we might see in this matchup because Julio's a southpaw, sticks and moves, doesn't really stand right in front of guys, has good lateral movement. And what do we see with Davy Grant, right? We see a guy that used to be kind of a grappler. Right now, he's this odd, dynamic, quirky, and funky style of striker to where if you can't pick up on his timing, you're going to get picked apart from range. And we kind of saw Julio give, Santos a lot of issues playing that game from the outside. And then he goes out there, gets a finish over John Castaneda, which is impressive. And then almost 2 years ago, right? So it's been a little while since we've seen him. He goes out there and wins a decision over Johnny Munoz, but I like what we've seen from Santos, right? And those shoot-to-box guys, it's like they build them in a lab. They all fight the exact same way. They got that good Thai, style, high guard. They move forward. They put their foot on the gas. They try to beat you up with leg kicks. They move forward because they're like, what are you going to do? Take me down? I have excellent submission skills. I'll play guard. I'm good off my back. They all have very good elbows off the back. We saw that recently as well in the flyweight division. We saw recently in that fight with Loner Kavanaugh, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but shoot-to-box guy, right? They're all very, very dangerous off of their back. So they have this relentless style moving forward to where if you take them down, they're just not really concerned about it. And I think in this fight, I don't think we see Davy Grant resort to the grappling too much because of the submission threat. But Davy Grant, he's a sneaky fighter. I know he's pushing up there, close to 40, but this is a good fighter, man. He lost by Adrian Yanez, split decision. I thought he could have won that fight, right? Goes out there, he smokes Luis Smoke, gets a finish there. Goes out there and subs Rafael Sunsao. I know that that's an older Sunsao. Loses to Daniel Marcos by split decision, who is showing to be a really, really good prospect on the rise in the division. He could have won that fight. Right, so there's 2 split decision losses here out of these last 5 fights that he could have won, right? And then he goes out there and puts on a perfect performance against Ramon Tavares, to where I was concerned coming off of the injury, right, and all the different things that Grant had going on there. I was like, is his body going to hold up? What are we going to see from Davy Grant? And I think that, to be honest with you, Davy Grant's getting older, but if he looks anything, unless his last performance was a tease or something, if he looks like what he did against Ramon in that fight, I think he makes this look actually rather easy, because I know Julio Arce is pretty good, but I think Davy Grant, he's tricky. He's got good long rangey front kicks. He, mixes it up on the feet. He's hard to pick up on, and if you can't pick up on his timing, you're going to struggle. He'll absolutely pick you apart and convincingly win a decision. So I think that maybe we see Santos early on land some good shots on the feet. Maybe, something like that. And I believe it was Felipe dos Santos against Kavanaugh. It was that fight recently, right? So at the UFC London card, that was a great flyweight scrap. Those shoot-to-box guys, they're good, man. They move forward with reckless abandonment because they're like, if you take me down, I'll play. They have dangerous guards. They're good off their back with slicing with elbows. I just don't really think we see that in this matchup. I think Grant plays it from the outside, sticks and moves, works his way to a decision. I'm going with the old head here and Davy Grant to teach the young guy a lesson, man. I'm riding with Davy Grant. I like Davy Grant, too. I think he's fun to watch. Moving on to Luis Gurule versus Buday Osbourne. I think this is a little bit more interesting than what people might think. Look, I know Buday Osbourne, he's 33, right? And he's out of his last 5 fights, he's only won 1, right? He's coming off the loss to Tyson Nam. He got finished. Goes out there, wins a split decision over Charles Johnson, to where when we saw that, I'm like, Charles Johnson, he's really good in the flyweight division. He's rangy, he's tricky on the feet. And I'm like, that was a pretty solid win. Even though it was close, it was a very solid win, right? Goes out there, gets subbed by Asu Almabayev. That's a dangerous guy on the rise. Goes out there, gets finished again, and then loses a decision to Lazy Boy, to where I thought that Buday could have won the fight. He had a Lazy Boy in all sorts of trouble. So I wouldn't say that Osbourne has lost a step. The issue is, if he can keep the fight at range, if he can keep it at, at kickboxing range, to where he's landing good rangy shots from the outside, he can hang with anyone in this division. And frankly, he could beat anyone in this division, right? If you're just going to play the kickboxing game back and forth from the outside, Osbourne, he might be a world champ, man. Like, I know that obviously, it's not just a kickboxing fight, but if there was no grappling allowed, I think he's one of the better strikers, honestly, in this division, especially from range. I know he struggles in, close quarters, but to me, that's exactly the issue in this fight is Luis. This dude is a savage, man, right? From what we saw on the Contender Series, he won a split decision over Nick there, right? But coming to the UFC, before this, I caught some of his fights over in Fury, man. I mean, this guy, he's dangerous. He moves forward. He's got a relentless, grueling style. He's got submissions. He does have some power. Like, he's just kind of got that, like, relentless pace and relentless style that doesn't allow you to operate in space. And that is where Buday runs into issues. If he cannot keep Luis, out at range, keep his back off the fence, Buday's just going to get smothered and just destroyed in this fight, right? But if he can, keep Luis at range, I think Buday could actually pull this one off here. I really do think that. But from what we've seen so far from Buday, I'm going to have to see something a little bit more before I pick him again, because if he loses this fight, he may find himself outside of the UFC. I think he's a very skilled fighter, just has had some close calls here, some close fights, some unfortunate things. I just think that the hole in the takedown defense, the fact that if you can smother him up against the fence, crush the space, you can find success. Luis has crazy pace, man. He's got a crazy pace. He's good on the inside. He has solid grappling. I think he's going to be a little bit too much for Buday in this fight. I got Luis getting this one done. It just feels like they're feeding Osbourne to a prospect here. Moving on to the middleweight division, we have Robert Valentin and Torres Finney. Man, everyone's favorite dude off the Contender Series. This man had so many fights on the damn Contender Series that, you know, it just felt like, is this guy ever going to get a contract? And Dana was harsh on him and, you know, all those different things. And it was kind of like, we're like, man, Dana, damn, Dana, like, tell us how you really feel. Like, he really wasn't feeling the vibe from, you know, Torres Finney here. And I'm like, this dude could probably win 10 Contender Series fights, all of them by finish. And Dana probably might not bring this. Something about this guy's style just wasn't meshing with Dana. And a lot of that had to do with he was just grappling the whole time, not really looking for a finish. So I kind of understand that. But what you can't deny about Finney is if you basically have to deal with that early criticism of Dana before you even get to the UFC, you come back onto the Contender Series when they call you up and say, we got another opportunity here, man. Come on back. He had to go through numerous Contender Series fights to get an opportunity. That shows me something. That shows us something. This guy's gritty, man. He's not in his head. He's not being mentally defeated by facing some of that adversity, hearing those criticisms from Dana White. I know that that might seem like something small, but a lot of guys, that happens and they're like, man, I guess I'm not good. I don't know here. We didn't see that from Finney. We saw a guy come back with confidence, and he said, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to show you something. I'm going to get a finish. You bring me back. You gave me another opportunity. I'm going to make it happen. That is exactly what Torres did. I'm high on this guy, man. And I don't think he's going to be a world champ or anything like that. But I think that in terms of his style, his grit, the mentality that he brings to the table, that Contender Series debacle, that showed me a lot about this guy. I think his grappling pace, he's a little fella, man. He's, very short guy for the division. He's got no neck. Like, how you going to sub this dude? What, are you going to put him in an arm bar? He's got basically no arms, right? He's this big ball of muscle, like he's got no neck to grab a hold of. Like, how you getting this dude out of there, man? Like, how you going to spin his head around? It's like the Yoel Romero where the traps connect to the ears, man. Like, I like Finney. I think he's fun. Obviously, when he takes guys down and doesn't really look to advance positions, it can be boring, obviously. But he has nasty power as well. That's something people, I think, tend to underestimate is because guys know that he's going to level change and try to get to those takedowns, it opens up that overhand right. And we've seen him knock guys out on the regional scene with that. He's young. He's powerful. He is very, very explosive. And I just worry we've seen because guys that are normally built like him, that are these big yoked up dudes, they gas out. We don't really see that from Finney. He's got a little bit of a crazy style, right? I know he can fatigue at moments, right? Especially against a game guy like Robert Valentin. But I think he gets this one done, man. I'm going to say Finney finds a decision in this matchup because I think Robert Valentin, he's a good fighter. He's dangerous on the feet. He's explosive. He's very dynamic on the feet. And I think that he is actually the better striker. The problem is I don't think that he has more power than Finney. I know Finney doesn't have a dynamic, a dynamic arsenal on the feet, but Finney has more one-shot KO power. I think that, yes, Valentin has more tools on the feet, and he is the better overall striker. But we saw against Ryan Loder that, yeah, Loder is a very high-level wrestler. But, I see some similarities here to where I know that, you could say Loder maybe he's a better wrestler than Finney or whatever, but I just see a scenario where Finney can take him down, control him for 15 minutes, or maybe even find a finish. Maybe hits him with an overhand right, maybe takes him down and beats him up on the ground because, these wins prior to getting to the UFC, like we saw a lot of finishes from Valentin, and no matter the fight, it's basically been always pretty exciting with Robert. But if you could smother him with the grappling, not allow him to operate in space and utilize his striking, I just don't think that he has the grappling caliber to hang with some of these guys in the UFC. And we're going to find out if Finney's grappling is just that good. We've seen him on the Contender Series. We've seen him on the regional scene. This is a game opponent in front of him and Robert Valentin who does have the ability to put Finney out and get him out of there. But I just don't see it happening. I think Finney... Moving on, we have Gerald Meerschaert and Brad Tavares. This is a tricky fight to me, right? Because both guys, they're 37 years of age. I mean, they were almost born on the same day, man. Like, look at this here. 37 years of age, 3 months, 2 weeks. I mean, these dudes, man, but at the end of the day is this. I just don't see how, look, Brad Tavares is good takedown defense. That's kind of always, what do we know about Brad Tavares? Even though he's getting older in his career, he's durable, he's good on the feet, he's fun on the feet, and he's a hard guy to take down. And if you do take him down, he does a good job at getting back to his feet. So does Gerald Meerschaert have the wrestling to trouble Brad Tavares? No, I don't think he does. I don't think he has the takedown entries to trouble Brad. But in the event that Meerschaert is getting his ass beat, like we see in a lot of his fights, and Tavares, goes to the ground with him and gets tangled up in some sort of submission, that is how I see Brad losing this fight. Is he going to get outpointed by GM3? I know GM3 in his last fight against Ranier de Ridder, Ranier made GM3 look like a glory kickboxing champ out there, man. Like, GM3 was landing some really, really good shots on the feet, and he actually was fighting a pretty good fight. I know he got subbed, but, the bottom line is this. GM3 over his stretch, gets KO'd by Pyfer, dangerous power, loses to Andre Petroski, subs Brian Barberena, subs Edmund Shabazian after he was getting destroyed, right? So, and then that's kind of been the story with GM3. So as long as Tavares doesn't entertain the grappling, doesn't find himself in a sticky situation to where Gerald can grab a limb or something like that, I think Tavares wins this fight. And I know Brad's had a rough go here. He lost to Dricus du Plessis. He got, finished by Bruno Silva. That looks a little rough now. Beats Chris Weidman by decision. That was a Weidman coming back after the leg break, right? So Weidman was very hesitant in that fight, right? I think. Goes out there, gets finished by Gregory Rodriguez, and it's like Tavares was known for his durability and his chin. Is that gone? And then he goes out there and loses to Jun Young Park by decision. So we've seen a little bit of everything from Brad recently. He's a game opponent. He's fought basically every who's who in the middleweight division. It seems like he's fought Adesanya, he's fought DDP, he's fought all these guys to where Tavares' game. He's better on the feet than Gerald. I don't think that he will entertain the grappling with GM3. Brad needs a win. He's a fun fighter. And I think that Jared has the grappling advantage. I just don't think he has the takedown entries to get Brad to where he needs the fight to go. And I think if Gerald takes that big of an ass whooping to where they're in the grappling, I think that would be Brad getting him out of there. So I'm going to say that Brad wins this fight by decision. I think he kind of just picks apart Meerschaert on the feet. If he does enter the grappling, I think that he does stay safe, works back to his feet, gets to range, and just bangs up Gerald on the feet. Maybe Brad finds a finish, right? But I just don't think, unless Gerald can get him to the ground and find a submission, I don't think he outpoints Brad on the feet. So I'm going to go Tavares by decision here. Moving on, we have Kennedy Nzechukwu versus Martin Buday. Now, look, Martin is someone that he gets a lot of shit. And a lot of that has to do with his most recent performance against Andrei Arlovski. You want a split decision over a 40-some-year-old Andrei Arlovski to where the expectation was, look, the UFC is like, come on, man. Get rid of this guy that's basically robbing us for a paycheck. Like, Arlovski, he might be one of the smartest UFC fighters ever. That man was 40-some years of age, getting these little, guys that aren't super dangerous on the rise, sticking and moving, not taking a ton of shots, making it through these fights and making a solid paycheck. Like, you got to give it up to Arlovski for kind of finessing the system, man. Like, Arlovski, he's solid, right? But at that age, man, this isn't Arlovski back in the day, right? Martin should have went out there and absolutely destroyed him, and he didn't do it. So this was a very, in my opinion, a horrible performance by Martin. Goes out there and gets obliterated by, probably the future champ of the division, and Shamil Gaziev, who has dangerous power, and when he's on, he is one of the better heavyweights in the division, man. He's the GOAT, man. Like, Shamil that's one of the reasons that they can't get the Aspinall versus Jones fight signed is because, Shamil's kind of entered the chat there, right? And they're trying to figure out, everyone's ducking Shamil, man. That's what's causing the heavyweight division up into scrambles, man. But look, in all seriousness, I do think Shamil's a very good fighter. And that was a great performance by Shamil. Beats Lucas Bresky by decision. Beats Jake Collier by decision. Beats Josh Parisian by submission. I'm just not impressed with Martin. I know he has power. I know he has finishing ability. This is the issue of Kennedy is a former light heavyweight. He's someone who ever since moving up to heavyweight, right? He beat Devin Clark by sub, loses to Justin Jacoby, loses to OSP, moves up to heavyweight, finishes Chris Barnett. And then it goes out there and finishes Lucas Bresky. So we're seeing with Kennedy that he has what I expected when he goes up to heavyweight. I'm not saying he's going to be a top contender in the heavyweight division, but we see when these guys are lighter and they go up a weight class, they seem to have a skill and speed advantage. Not all the time, but I would say more times than most. And that's kind of what we've seen. Kennedy has a very good front kick up the middle. He has some good tight hands on the feet. He's got a good left hand, and it seems like he's a step ahead with the speed compared to these other guys. And I honestly think that Kennedy makes this look actually really easy. I'm going to go Kennedy by finish. I think that Kennedy kind of picks him apart, keeps him at range in the first round, frustrates Martin where he gets overzealous or just shuts down. And then Kennedy gets him out of there, in the second round. I think, look, one of the critiques with Kennedy, especially at light heavyweight, he would fail to open up. He wouldn't throw enough volume. He'd get outpointed. He would just shell up and sometimes just show up and look like he doesn't even want to be in there. Since coming to heavyweight, he has a new energy, a newfound life. And don't forget, he was getting beat up by Carlos Ulberg in Ulberg's debut, weathered the storm, and was able to KO Carlos Ulberg, which is Carlos's only loss in the UFC, right? So don't forget about that. I know that Carlos was doing very, very good. He still has a win over Carlos, man. And we've seen how good Ulberg is, right? So don't forget that Nzechukwu does have the ability when he shows up to finish just about anybody. I'm not saying that he's going to be a heavyweight champ or anything, but I think his skill set is a step ahead of Martin. Unless Martin takes him down, subs him, or finds a shot. Of course, this is heavyweight. Anything can happen. I think Kennedy's speed, his technique is going to frustrate Martin. I'm going Kennedy by second round finish. Moving on, we have Cortavius, Romious, and Cheng-Ho Lee. I mean, this is kind of an interesting fight here. Look, and I saw down here that a lot of the Tapology community is thinking that Lee is going to get this one done, which I think is interesting because I think with Cheng-Ho Lee, look, the guy's pretty good, right? He moves forward. He's got kind of this aggressive grapple type of style, likes to back you up against the fence, look for the takedowns, mix things up. And he does have a pretty solid skill set. But I'm always skeptical of these guys that come off to the road to the UFC because we do see some really, really solid fighters that come off of there, like Zhang Minyang. Like, we've seen good fighters come from there. But as of recent, I'm not going to put the cart before the horse here. I need to see a little bit more from Lee before I feel confident. Coming off of, a split decision win here, I'm just not sure on what to expect from this guy because I'm not saying that Romious is a world beater, but what we've seen from him, he goes out there, gets finished by Ramon Tavares, who's a good striker, then comes back in, onto the Contender Series, gets a decision win over Imperado, and then goes out there and loses to Gaston by decision. And I'm just like, I don't think very highly of either one of these guys. But I'm just not sure about Lee. I've seen a little bit more from Romious that makes me go, okay, look, he does have finishing ability when the fight hits the floor. He does have decent striking on the feet to where I think he's a little bit better than Lee. And I think in terms of the grappling, I just don't know that Lee is going to be that troubling for him. So for that reason, I'm actually going to side with Romious in this fight. I actually think that he is able to pull this one off. I actually think that this is a close fight. I don't think either one of these guys is going to be particularly that good in the UFC, especially in the bantamweight division. But I'm going to go with Romious in this fight. Of course, Lee could go out there, mix things up, and find a victory here. But I think Cortavius is just a little bit better. I think he's a little bit better on the feet. He does have the finishing ability as well. I'm going to go Romious in this fight. I think he can pull it off. But either way, I'm not sold on either guy. All right, co-main event. We have Joe Anderson, Brito, and Pat Sabatini. Interesting fight here. Good matchmaking by the UFC because with Joe Anderson, Brito, he's coming off of a loss here to William Gomis. And again, Gomis is a tricky opponent. Rangy, difficult matchup, and is a very solid opponent. Right now, it's a close fight, right? And with Joe Anderson, Brito, he's dangerous on the ground. He's got good submissions, got good ground and pound, and has really, really dangerous power on the feet. I mean, he goes full ooga booga. He forgets the technique, swings these big looping shots, and we've seen the finish over Jack Shore. We saw him get the sub over JSP. We saw him KO Weston Wilson, and then we saw him get the finish over Lucas Alexander. Brito is dangerous. He is the more dangerous fighter in all aspects of MMA here. On the feet, he's more dangerous than Sabatini. He does have a very good ground game as well. I just get worried. I get worried because while Pat Sabatini is not particularly good on the feet, and the two losses throughout this, this five-fight, the last 5 fights here, he got finished by Damon Jackson. I don't think that that's a great look. Then gets finished by Diego Lopez. Okay, that's Diego Lopez. But he's out there beating TJ Laramie, gets a submission win over Lucas Almeida, and coming off of a nice submission victory over JSP, right? So JSP's got a solid ground game. But are we really sure that Pat Sabatini, if the fight hits the ground, while Sabatini does have really, really good grappling, he's got a beautiful rear naked choke, he's got slick jiu-jitsu, he's very, very good. I feel like you're kind of banking on him winning the grappling exchanges and finding a submission in this fight. Because while Brito isn't the best if you're able to take him down and control him and put him in bad positions, he does struggle a little bit there. But I think on the feet, Pat has to be worried. He can't just, be reckless on the feet. He can't be reckless with shooting the takedowns. I think he's got to set him up intelligently. And if he does get clipped by Brito, I think that he gets knocked out. So I just don't know if Sabatini is going to be able to have a ton of success with the grappling. Maybe he does early and is able to find a sub or something, but I think Joe Anderson has an answer for that. And I think that he finds a finish in this matchup. I'm going to say in the second round, he's able to find a TKO. Maybe finds a sub, but I think that he is able to land a shot, hurt Pat, and get him out of there. But again, I absolutely see a scenario to where Pat could take him down, work the wrestling in there, take his back and find some sort of submission. But I like that Brito's a little bit more well-rounded. I don't know that his grappling is that much far behind Sabatini, if at all. I struggle to see Sabatini winning this one. If he's going to, I think he does by sub, maybe wins a decision, but I just think Brito's the more dangerous guy here. I think on the feet, he's quite a bit better, and we've seen if you can land on Sabatini, you can get him out of there. I think Brito's grappling is good enough. I got Brito by finish here. Main event, we have Josh Emmett versus Lerone Murphy. I'm really excited for this fight, actually. I was excited when the UFC booked this one because this is like your perfect look. We have a guy on the rise in Lerone Murphy who seems like he's the total package. And we get to find out in this fight, is the hype real? Is this guy the next big thing in the featherweight division? Because the door's kind of wide open now. Now that Ilia Topuria vacated and moved up to lightweight, we're looking for those next guys in the division, right? We have Volk versus Diego coming up. We have Mavzar Evloev. Like, we have some very good fighters. We're also looking for the next guys in the division. And I think that one of those guys that we're starting to look at is a Lerone Murphy, who has a well-rounded skill set. He has good grappling. He's very clean on the feet. Good boxing, good kicks, good range management. And he's really a complete fighter. And that's what I like about Lerone Murphy. And from what we've seen from him since he's been in the UFC, I like that he has finishing ability. He's got good knees. He's got good elbows in close. And we've seen him in some close matchups. We've seen him, against Gabriel Santos, who's a game opponent. We saw against Josh Kulabau, he looked good. He looked very good against Edson Barbosa. But again, that's an older Edson. Goes out there and wins a decision over Dan Ige after a scare there. So he got clipped by a big shot by Dan Ige. And I watched that and I go, you get hit by that by Josh Emmett. There's no such thing really as getting hit by a right hand by Josh Emmett and not getting KO'd, right? Josh Emmett, if he lands that big ooga booga right hand, he's putting anyone at 45. And I even think if he landed that at 55 on anyone, he's putting anyone out. I think that he is one of the hardest hitting featherweights in UFC history. But the problem with Emmett is, yes, he's 40 years old. Yes, he's coming off of one of the nastiest KOs we've seen. A beautiful picture-perfect overhand right that landed on Bryce Mitchell, had the guy seizing on the ground, basically. That was a devastating finish. He's coming off of 2 losses. Gets subbed by Yair Rodriguez, was getting tuned up on the feet, and goes the distance 25 minutes with Ilia Topuria, who most guys, they don't get to see the judges' scorecards. They're out there getting KO'd by Ilia Topuria. So that loss, it's like, now it's kind of like, well, look, Emmett went 25 minutes with him. And before that, he beat Calvin Kattar, which I thought Kattar could have won that fight. Then he, beats Dan Ige. So we've seen Josh Emmett every single fight that this guy has been in since he's been in the UFC. They've all been pretty entertaining. He's a scrapper. He's got dangerous power. He does have a wrestling background, but we don't see a lot of it. A lot of his stats, when you look at the grappling, actually come from one fight. It's not like Josh Emmett is this guy going out there and chasing takedowns the entire fight. He's someone that prefers to stand on the feet and bang it out. The problem, he does have a significant power advantage. If he lands a right hand or a short left hook on Lerone Murphy, he's going to knock him out. I have no doubt about that. But I struggle to see where Josh Emmett, he's very predictable. And Lerone Murphy's a young guy. I know he's 33, but he's young in the UFC in terms of his fight career. He hasn't really tasted much adversity other than really getting dropped by Ige. He's had some close fights here and there. But I think he's faster than Josh Emmett. I think that he has a more dynamic skill set. He has more tools to utilize in this fight to where I think that he, without question, can outpoint and outland Josh Emmett over the course of 25 minutes. The problem becomes he almost has to be perfect for 25 minutes. So can Murphy do that in a fight with Emmett, who, like I said, I believe is probably the hardest one of, I know we have Topuria, some other guys that have been along the way. One-shot KO power, Josh Emmett is as dangerous as it gets. If he lands that shot, he can absolutely KO Lerone Murphy, and I wouldn't be surprised. In any Josh Emmett fight, you're just not shocked if you see him KO somebody. He's 40 years of age. He's coming off of a very impressive win over Bryce Mitchell. It just feels like Josh Emmett is one of those guys who, yes, he sits at the top of the featherweight division, somewhere usually between that top 5 and top 10, right somewhere in that window, right? He's number 8 right now. That seems to be kind of the wheelhouse for Josh Emmett. Anytime he fights these guys that are going to be in the top 5, these guys that are on their way to the top 5, he just seems to not have the same answers. And he tends to spam the overhand right. He's very predictable on the feet. He doesn't fight behind a particularly good jab. It's all about power with Josh Emmett. I don't know that that's enough to outland and outpoint a guy like Lerone Murphy, who's very clean, very skilled. And there's a good possibility that, Lerone Murphy is just being overhyped. And I do think that he's a very skilled fighter, and I don't know that he should be, a lot of people are really high on this guy, and I get it. He's very good, right? But sometimes the odds confuse me, man, because I think all it takes is one shot from Josh Emmett. And if he knocked out Lerone Murphy, wouldn't be shocked at all, considering what we saw in the Ige fight, seeing that we have seen Lerone get hit with some good shots. You get hit by Emmett, you're probably getting starched, man. So as long as Murphy avoids that for 25 minutes, I think that he can get it done. Maybe he finds a finish over Emmett. I'm just not so sure. I don't think he's as good of a striker as Yair. He's not as good of a boxer as Ilia Topuria, but I think that he's a well-rounded fighter. He's got a well-rounded skill set to where he can mix it up on Emmett. I think he outpoints him and is able to win a decision and get it done. So if you guys enjoyed this video, please give it a like. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you do not miss an upload. I appreciate it. See you next time.